Welcome to the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. In this two-part series, Jack Schonely, Tony Webber, and I sit back down for a full-length interview with LA County Fire Pilot and 2024 HAI Pilot of the Year Award recipient, Mike Sagely. In this engaging conversation, we cover a wide range of topics, from the profound impact a career in aviation can have on family life and mental health, to the importance of mentorship and preparation for success. Join us as Mike shares his journey from serving as an Army pilot during a pivotal time in history to navigating the challenges of modern aviation. He reflects on the transition from the Vietnam War era to flying iconic helicopters like the Blackhawk and Apache, and discusses his selection process for the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, along with the rigorous training and deployments that defined his military career. We also delve into the realities faced by military and public safety personnel in maintaining strong family units amidst the demands of the roles and stresses of the job. Mike provides invaluable insights on transitioning from service to civilian life and working as a pilot for the LA County Fire Department, detailing the diverse missions they undertake, including rescues and firefighting operations. We wrap up with a compelling discussion on the critical importance of aircraft maintenance in firefighting and the strategic role of helitack crews. Mike concludes with advice for aspiring aviators, emphasizing the values and integrity, reputation, and professional training. Thank you to our sponsors, Anodyne Electronics Manufacturing, Collins Aerospace, and Wysong Enterprises.
Welcome to the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. The Hangar Z podcast is the first and only podcast dedicated to promoting and exploring the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Join your host, Jon Gray, Jeff Ratkovich, and Jack Schonely.
Still southbound, skidding to a stop. Stand by here. Looks like you're getting ready to bail. Heads up, guys, bailing. Okay, the guy, he's running through the house, jumping the fence, threw the shotgun, threw something out. Grabbing the shotgun. Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again. He is armed. Stay there. Hold your position.
4 on the stop. You're in custody.
Good advising code 4 on the stop.
Hey, welcome to Hangar Z podcast. I'm your host, Jon Gray. It sounds like I got a frog in my throat, but I don't. The last couple of weeks, I've been battling all kinds of different illnesses. This is one of them, but happy to be a part of this conversation. And this is a conversation that started at HAI. We had the privilege to speak with Mike Sagely from LA County. He was the Pilot of the Year Award recipient. And I say it's an award. It's not really an award. It's something you earned, because of the actions that you took, not only from the previous year, but over the course of your career. That's a super prestigious award. So it really was an honor for us to sit down with you, Mike, at HAI and talk about some of your career. And we realized in the middle of that conversation that 1 hour was not sufficient to talk to you about not only your experiences, but some of the larger conversational points that we want to touch on, such as the effects of the career on the family, PTSD, the firefighting aspect, which is huge. So we're honored to have you back on to talk about a lot of those things. And to do that, we got the band back together. And we talked about this at HAI. Got Jack Schonely and Tony Webber in the same room. How you doing, gentlemen?
Very good.
Doing good. I love when our band gets back together. There's anything better than that.
Yeah,
that's right, Professor.
Yeah. So the Pasadena flying recently took place, and San Diego County and San Diego PD flew in. Mike, did you guys fly into that?
We did. It was not me, but
okay.
It was the other aircraft or other air squad.
Okay. Well, I saw your guys' new 412 EPX. Absolutely beautiful.
Thank you.
I did manage to sneak myself out in the grass and place a few stickers in some strategic spots. I don't know if you guys have found them yet or not.
I'm sure we'll find them in about a year.
On a brand new 412.
Yeah, it's a beautiful ship. Yeah, good to see you guys. And Mike, of course, it's a privilege to have you back on the podcast. Thank you for joining us.
Oh man, thank you. It's my honor. I'm humbled to be able to do something like this and actually have at least 3 people that are interested in my background and story.
A lot more than that, Mike.
Well, that's one of the funnest parts of doing the podcast is just sitting down and talking with people that have the same interests and same outlook on a lot of things that we do. So it's a lot of fun. I feel like a lot of times it's just hangar talk, and makes it a lot of fun. So
yeah, it was actually what was really great about the first go around was having my children listen to it. And they're like, Dad, I didn't know some of that. I didn't know this. I didn't know that. I thought, oh my gosh, like, maybe I need to sit down and start talking with them more or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
They're all grown up and gone away, so it's hard to catch them.
Yeah. Well, that's the other part. The other cool part about this is it memorializes a lot of those things. And now some of our hopes with the institutional knowledge that disappears when people retire or they do something different. A lot of experience walks out the door with people that leave the career field. A lot of those lessons that have been learned are, almost forgotten if they aren't memorialized. So our hope in having these conversations is to memorialize a lot of those lessons that have been learned over the course of our careers. That way it maybe impacts someone who doesn't need to learn that same lesson in the way that we might have, so neat side aspect of the podcast. But for the Hangar Z podcast, one of our traditions is drink of the day. Drink of the day for us is just kind of a way to break the ice a little bit and talk about some of the good beverages that we're having. If I was down in San Diego, Tony and I'd be pulling up a chair at some brewery somewhere.
Oh yeah.
But we're not. But Tony, let's start with you. What's your drink of the day?
Well, I don't want to disappoint anybody. It is still early, so I'm going with the Kirkland sparkling water. But I will be going out for a beer after the podcast, but I went with water today, and hopefully, Jack, you're not disappointed in me.
No, I'm proud of you, actually.
Jeff Rakovich would be proud of you as well. Very proud. Mike?
I'm actually just drinking straight water with a little bit of Mio or Mayo.
Okay.
That flavoring, you got some have caffeine in it, some don't. And I try and consume as much water during the day as I can. That way the alcohol has less effect on me at night.
Mike, that suspiciously looks like a beer to me.
It's not, I can assure you.
It's got an amber tint to it, doesn't it, Tony?
Sure does.
It's orange flavor.
Okay.
Now, if it was 5:00 and you're drinking something spicy, what would it be?
I usually do like a seltzer with either a shot of vodka or a shot of rum in it.
Okay.
Like a White Claw or a Topo Chico, or that's my balance of calorie to alcohol.
Okay. We refer to those the White Claw with vodka. We call it Vodclaws. So that's a good drink right there.
I like it.
Jack,
I'm sticking to my usual. I'm back to the liquid death.
Oh, liquid
and
death.
It's severed lime today.
Very nice.
Yesterday I met Halsey Scheider from the Helicopter Podcast up in Redmond for a morning coffee, and we both had a liquid death there, a new flavor, and it was great. It was like the peach, and we both liked that. So I'm continuing with that, waiting for them to call and sponsor us, and who knows? Never know. Liquid deaths.
All right.
Severed
There
lime.
you go. Wow. That's
Severed
quite a
lime.
plug. Good job.
Well,
Isn't that nice?
the theme for this whole drink of the day in this podcast, I guess, is water. I kind of preluded the fact that I've been fighting some illnesses and still trying to hydrate as a result of some of those. So I'm drinking the smart water, hoping that smart water rubs off a little bit. It hasn't yet, but I'm hopeful that it might.
Yeah. John, don't hold your breath on smart water. I've been drinking that for years, and here I am. So it's not going to work.
Well, I'm very hopeful. On the beer front, Tony, I did see that 3 San Diego breweries won awards this last year, the top 3 awards at I think it's the World Cup event.
Oh, wow.
North Park Brewing was one of them. And North Park Brewing is absolutely amazing.
That's a good place.
I think it was North Park Brewing, Pizza Port, and I cannot remember the third, but there was 3. So
was it Mike Hess?
Might have been.
Okay. Yeah, he's the Mike Hess breweries down here are really popular too. So I wouldn't be surprised if that was the third one.
Yeah. Another reason to visit San Diego. Just saying.
Well, I keep telling you guys, come down here and I'll show you a good time.
I'm waiting for a retirement to happen, and I'll come on.
Here we go. Mike, I'm getting a lot of pressure here from these guys.
Well, that's drink of the day, and again, it's an honor to be on the podcast with you guys.
Absolutely.
Each one of you guys, I really appreciate your friendships and everything you've done for the industry. So, Mike, getting back to you and your career, you've had a really long career. It's been successful in so many different fronts. Before you kind of get into what you're doing now and how you got there, can you talk a little bit about where you grew up and where you went to school? And that's mainly for the folks that didn't hear the episode that came out of HAI?
Yes, I'm a California boy. Grew up in San Juan Capistrano and moved there in 1964. And man, what a great place to grow up. Everything outdoors, right? Out every day playing, beautiful weather. Rain's very minimal, obviously. And near the beach, in the hills. It's just a wonderful place to grow up. Small town. Everybody knew everybody. We played Little League together, football together. Went to high school, actually 2 different schools. Went to San Clemente High School for 2 years. And then the area was growing so rapidly, they built another school, which ended up being closer to where I lived. It was Capistrano Valley. So I did 2 years at Capistrano Valley High School. I graduated in 1979. Holy moly. Long time ago. So,
well, you just dated yourself.
Yeah.
Easy.
I wish there was a place similar to that nowadays. I mean, California is still California to a point, but this was small town USA, Shangri-La, and I couldn't have hoped for a better place to grow up. And I was listening to some of these, like I was talking about some of these podcasts, and I remembered as a kid, they talk about playing soldiers and being outside and being active and having BB gun fights and orange fights and apple fights and just doing kid stuff. And I just wish that more kids today were interested in that. I think too many are just stuck inside today doing other stuff. I mean, I tried to raise my kids very active and outdoorsy as well. They were right on the very front edge of that kind of tech wave, if you will. I tried to emulate as much as I could of their upbringing, what little I was around, to what I grew up with, because I felt like it was valuable in many ways. So great place.
Forces you as a kid to be resourceful.
Yeah.
To go outside and actually figure out something to do that's fun.
Yep.
So I think that resourcefulness is important.
And then from there, I went, my parents actually moved away and I ended up in San Diego, and that's where I ended up going to college. Played my sport there. We talked a little bit about that with volleyball. I ended up in volleyball. I was big on baseball, but ended up in volleyball. It was very, very good for me. Taught me a lot about myself, a lot about team sports, a lot about discipline, hard work and focus, body pain, mental pain. All of those things, I think, translate well to my next career, which obviously was in the military. I hear that as a commonality too. A lot of the guys that I spent a lot of time with grew up playing football, 2-a-days in Texas when it's 110 degrees, kind of thing. It does build a certain level of mental toughness and physical toughness that translates well, to the military. And I was very fortunate to have a pretty good career on the sports side before I made the decision to go into the military.
You talk about growing up in San Clemente, and I think about flying in the area. And Tony, I know you're super familiar with the long rifle, that transition there along the coastline. And living in San Clemente, did you see as a kid a lot of the military aircraft going back and forth?
I did. Yeah, they went right over our house. Had the young Marines come up out of Pendleton into San Clemente to hang out and, enjoy the beach and drink and do those things. And I hate to admit it, but we did sort of kind of mock them, if you will, a little bit and tease them a little bit, for whatever stupid reason, typical high school stupid stuff. Didn't really pay too much attention. But we also had El Toro nearby. So we had jets right there, and they had the air show there. I remember seeing the Blue Angels and the Thunderbirds, whether it was in San Diego, down at Miramar, watching the Blue Angels. Or had a lot of military, actually, when you look at it back then. A bit of military in Southern California. Yeah. So
do you think that early exposure to a lot of that as a kid lent to some of your desire to go in?
In my particular instance, I don't think so. That's kind of why I had made that statement in the first go around there about, people who knew me were the last to think that I would have went into the military and not only have gone into the military, but actually sort of flourished and really embraced it and liked it and made a career out of it. I would have made a longer career out of it had circumstances been a bit different. So it really was I was the long blonde haired beach rat volleyball kid, not so much onto the military side of things. And interestingly enough, two other guys that I was very close friends with, and volleyball players as well, collegiate volleyball players. Both went on to be Navy SEALs, and another one went to the Ranger Bat. So,
Wow.
Nice.
out of my small circle of friends down there, relatively small circle, 4 of them ended up in the military, of all things. So, I'm not certain exactly what was the inspiration in their particular case, but for me, maybe it was the unknown. Maybe it was a transition of life. I'm not quite certain, but I mean, I think from the moment I stepped through the door, I was like, all right, I'm good with this, in all honesty. So,
Yeah, think about athletics as a kid, and you look at all the different skill sets you develop and build upon that pay off as you go into your later life. You talk about that mental fortitude that you develop. It doesn't matter what sport you're playing, but that's a part of that. If you're playing team sports, you have that teamwork concept and that concept of chain command, that comes into play as you go into paramilitary and law enforcement or fire. And then obviously the military, you get that chain of command and understanding what that looks like. So I really do find it interesting to kind of go through people's backgrounds and to find those things. Because I feel like there's a high correlation between folks that not only played these sports, but excelled, and to see how that translates into later life.
And the desire to succeed and to win. A mission, when you're given a mission, that is about success. That's about winning. That's about overcoming. Once you make your plan and you go to execute, that desire to execute with precision and to be successful is essentially winning a game. This crap they have today, don't keep score, winning doesn't matter. Oh, shit, it doesn't.
Yeah. Yep.
It matters in life.
It sure does.
You want to win, or do you want to lose and be a part of the crowd? Really is what it comes down to. So the mentality is I think there is a correlation. There's a similar correlation to that. 100%.
And I'm with you, Mike. I listen to a lot of those guys on the podcast that similar to what you're talking about, and a lot of them are operators, military people, and I'm fascinated by the stories too. And although they are different and they vary, there are some consistencies, and it's the things we're talking about. Discipline, pain, respect, going out and into the unknown and being resourceful. All the stuff we're talking about. It leads to a successful soldier or airman or Marine.
Yes. And I would even go one further and to say your coaches, those mentors,
absolutely
hard coaches that bust your cojones in practice and have a high expectation of your performance and pushing you to excel in that. And for me, similarly in the military, I would make the sports analogy that I wanted to be good. I wanted to be the best. I wanted to be recognized as being one of the best players. That drove me to work hard and spend extra time, working at it. Never miss a day in the gym, run my hardest when we're doing endurance training and sprints and things on the floor. When I got into the military, it kind of, some of the things you had on the outline, for questions was, wherever I was not enough. I wanted more. I wanted to be more. I wanted to be better. I wanted to be challenged. And so it really is sort of a carryover and a carry on. And I would even say the same thing happened post-retirement in the fire side of things. And me pursuing where I wanted to end up which was in essence what was considered the best fire organization. And of course, that's where I strove to get to, and fortunately I did. So there is a recipe there, and again, I've tried to pass that on to my kids, and I see them similarly doing that, which it started with the sports. I drove them into sports. I drove them to excel in sports. They were all collegiate athletes. They were all in the high school realm, top athletes, all league, all county, MVP, things of that nature, because I made them, work at it. I don't think they liked me at the time, but because I felt like that was a successful recipe for the latter part of your life or the rest of your life.
Well, I think as a kid, when you can figure out the things that make you stand aside or stand apart from your competitors or the people you're trying to rise above, you can identify that. Now as an adult, you can do the same thing. You know, you learned this is what made me successful in my youth. And now I can look at inward and identify those things that will make me successful in this environment and do the same thing. So it's really just identifying that and excelling in those areas. And to learn that as a teenager, I think is crucial, you know, for your overall success.
Thank you to our sponsor, Wysong Enterprises. Wysong Enterprises offers specialty rotorcraft completion facility, focusing on solutions and installs for customers in various industries, including EMS, law enforcement, energy utility, forestry, tourism, security, and corporate applications across major OEM platforms. Visit us at wysongusa.com.
Yes. And I would go one further that was not really pushed on me, but I pushed on my children, which was academics, formal education. I wanted them to learn a second language, but they wouldn't listen to me. They took language, but they didn't really pursue it, you know, completely. But I wanted them to be just as focused on their academics as they were on their athletics. I made a mistake with mine, you know, early on. I did not finish my degree before I went into the Army. I finished it once I was in the Army. I went to degree completion. But I think the one opportunity I missed out on, had I been better formally educated, especially in math, I could have went to Pax River and I could have been, you know, went through the experimental test pilot course.
Yeah.
I had that opportunity available to me where I was in the Army. If I could have qualified, I could have gotten a spot instead of having to figure out how to get a spot. And I'm looking at that and I'm just looking at myself in the mirror, shaking my head and going, you know what, you blew this one. But there really wasn't any turning back. I mean, I could have went back. I realistically maybe could have went back to school for 4 or 5 years and then went to the course, but then I would have left my operational position and, you know, all the other things that I did. So that was one of my smaller regrets over life, was not being prepared for that opportunity. When opportunities come, that's great. You know, sometimes you make them, sometimes they fall in your lap. If you can't execute on them, then, you know, you obviously can't take advantage of them.
Yeah.
In this particular instance, that was a no-go.
I feel like that saying, luck is when preparation meets opportunity, and you can't have one without the other in most circumstances.
Yes.
And there are exceptions to that, but I think generally, if, like you're saying, if you've prepared yourself and an opportunity presents itself, then you're in a good position. You know, and that's what we try and express to our kids is, you know, providing those opportunities, giving yourself, you know, through your education, the most options that are possible. And, you know, there's a lot of conversations that surround the value of an education today because it's expensive, you know, and you look at what's happening in the school systems, and it's challenging to want to send your kid to a liberal institution to kind of, you know, hear what they have to say.
Right.
But I think in my mind, there's no doubt that the college education is helpful. You know, it may not open the door to the job you want, but your hard work and other parts of your life will do that for you.
Right.
So, anyways, going back to you, and you talked about your volleyball career. What was the moment in time where you decided to leave your athletic and collegiate career and decided to start pursuing the Army and becoming a pilot?
How I got into flight school, or how I pursued flight school, was kind of an interesting story. That came about by virtually meeting someone who introduced me to the concept of it. I was impressed with him. I thought he was very intelligent, very articulate. He was kind of that whole Top Gun looking cat, you know, all GQ, and he was all in, you know, and I thought, wow, that was impressive. I can see why he, you know, was going into something like that. I got to the point playing volleyball where I just wasn't really enjoying it. I mean, it became sort of laborious, and body was always hurting, and, you know, maybe I was just burnt out at the time. I did get released from the Olympic team, so I basically didn't have anything. I was done with college. So that pure focus just all of a sudden was gone. And I was so frustrated with the fact that I really wasn't doing anything with purpose. I mean, I had some part-time jobs and they were just zero. I'm 25 years old and I don't have any money. I don't have any prospect of any, significance. So I didn't really think it was going to happen, but I just went down. I literally just went down to the recruiter and said, tell me about this program. That's all I want to hear about. And I made it, I got through the program. I started taking the tests and passed the Class 1 flight physical, which typically gets a lot of people, usually with the eyes. And then, passed the board and was accepted. And I thought, well, there's no turning back now. This is an opportunity that's just, too good to be true. And it reignited my whole sort of mental focus on something with purpose. And I just never looked back. I mean, I just drove into it. And that's kind of the way I was. I'm like one of those unfortunate souls where I'm like I'm all in on stuff, almost to the point of sometimes being problematic. I get so mentally fixated on doing stuff. I have throttled back, I will say, at my age now, but at that time of my life, whatever was in front of me was like a laser, and I was moving full steam ahead on it. And so I'm on it. And I put all my energy and focus at that point and started moving, down my path.
That's cool. In a lot of ways, I think you have to be that way, especially in aviation. You can't be halfway in aviation. You've got to be fully focused on what you're doing and committed to the job, because there's a lot at stake, Yeah.
Yeah. You're not going to last too long if you're not paying attention. It's kind of a survival thing. If you want to be an old aviator, you got to hit it hard, and you got to continue to hit it hard. It's not something that you can ease up on realistically. You can fall back on experience to a point, but if you're not mentally focused on what you're doing, that's when things are going to be bad, especially if you're in a high risk flight environment. If you're doing just basic flying an airplane, airport to airport, that's generally, pretty basic. But in our particular world, especially on the fire rescue side, there's not a lot of room for daydreaming and not paying attention to what you're doing.
Oh, in our previous conversation, you talked about getting selected in the assessment process for the 160th. But before we get into that, can you talk about your time as an Army pilot and kind of what the geopolitical environment was during that time, and whether or not that had something to do with your decision later on to pursue the special operations kind of community?
Well, I actually pretty good time. I went in the late 80s, right? I went in 84, 85, 86 technically. And, they were in a big buildup. They just just had the Grenada operation, and they obviously noticed that there were some weak points in their capabilities. Post-Vietnam, it's typical. You have a big war, and then next thing you know, the Army gets gutted, and a lot of the experience leaves the military, or they push people out and they draw down equipment. And they just kind of press along with sort of the same old tactics, if you will, same equipment. But at that point in time, the Blackhawk was coming online and was becoming the prominent assault helicopter to replace the Huey. Apache was coming online to start replacing the Cobra. The Kiowa Warrior a little bit further behind, but it was replacing the 58s, the Charlies, or the Charlie Plus, whatever they were. But that thing was a dog, and so it was a good time. I mean, I was slated to go to Germany of all things, to a medevac unit, and I wanted to stay in the States, so I ended up trading orders with a guy in my class, and I went to the 82nd Airborne Division. So they're an 18th Airborne Corps unit. They are a deployable force. So they have generally the newer equipment. They have pretty good training hours and monies available, meaning flying hours for the units. So I actually got to fly a pretty fair amount. And I was part of the 1st and 17th Cav. And the one thing that the Cav did at least with the Hawks, was support the scout or the long range surveillance units for the cavalry. So I immediately got immersed in flying small teams, doing precision infill operations, doing fast rope, stabo, spies, external loads, 2-gun raids, just a real wide variety of things that really kind of allowed me to develop a diverse skill set and an understanding of a lot of different missions. And then I had the mentors that I had discussed, in the first go around. I had some W4s in there. We had a very young group of W1s and 2s, and then some really, really great Vietnam era W4s that were just outstanding mentors. And they were on us, and they allowed us to do the work and the planning, and we would go out and fly quite a bit, actually. And then I actually was deployed down to Honduras, maybe a year and a half, 2 years prior to Just Cause for Panama. So I got to fly around down there in a call it a high risk environment. It wasn't a combat zone at the time, but it's considered a high risk. Nicaragua, El Salvador, Honduras, that whole region was, had some not so great things going on there. So that was some great experience to get an out of the states or out of OCONUS deployment, they call it, as a young W1 at the time. So through that allowed me to establish a pretty good reputation amongst the senior warrants in our brigade. They knew I wanted to be an instructor pilot, and I think they felt like I had the ability and the desire and the maturity and all the things to move, quite quickly from my time and grade. And I was selected for the instructor pilot course right at about the time I made W2. So that was literally 2 years out of flight school. And typically they don't select for what they would call a track in the Army at the time. You could track safety, you could track maintenance, you could track as an instructor pilot. Generally till you're almost a W3. So that would be around your 7th, 8th year, 9th year or so. So I was moving along pretty good. That pushed me into a lot more responsibility. I was scared to death doing it because now all of a sudden I'm supposed to be this expert, and I knew the aircraft very well. I was very big on studying the aircraft and the academics, and, all the operational piece I was very confident with. I just wasn't confident with the notion that here I am, this, brand new W2, and I'm supposed to get in the aircraft with my commander or W3 or W4, somebody much senior to me or whatever, and be the quote, subject matter expert and control everything masterfully. And so that put me into some uncomfortable space. But the moral of this story is all these uncomfortable spaces allowed me to learn things at a very early on point in my career that all played a very important role in allowing me to actually be successful on the SOA side when I went to selection. I went to Desert Storm as that young W2 instructor. I went over there on the 8th of August with the very first aircraft in our brigade that were deployed, actually with the 82nd. So very early on in Desert Shield at the time. And I remember very clearly I remember two things. One, I got a gamma globulin shot in my tail end that felt like a golf ball. And the other one was the C5 was loaded down, to the hilt, and we were leaving out of Pope, and it was rainy, so the runway was wet. And I swear to God, I think we used every single foot of that runway to get in the air. It was alarming. I thought, oh my gosh, because I'd been on a few, loadouts at the time, and I knew about what that rotation point was on the rollout. And man, we were like, just going and going. And So, but I got over there very early into Saudi, so I got a chance to fly over there. I was flying with the W4, and we were doing a lot of training, just hair-raising dust landings. But I was being taught by a highly proficient, excellent aviator. And we would just pound them and pound them and pound them until I had them, dialed in and got used to flying and just zero illumination on, in the desert, nothing to navigate with. And I was put in charge essentially of what would be pre-H hour cross-border infills of our long-range surveillance units, our scout units, essentially. Me alone with the team, I was requested by the Lorsu commander to be the planner and the pilot. And part of that is because we would go out and we would train. At the time, we didn't have GPS. We only had what they call a Doppler. And the Doppler was only as accurate as you kept it, if you kept it updated. And it was only as accurate as the flux valve and the magnetic compass system on the aircraft, basically, for lack of a technical description. So some of them were really good, some of them were not so good. But you have to update it over a known point. And in the desert, you just got nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd be lucky if you got a road. So I kind of devised this plan where, and I wanted to put the guys accurately where they wanted to be. I mean, these guys were going on the ground. They were way out there in front of everybody. And I put them in the wrong spot. That could be, pretty hazardous. So that was seriously stressful for me. But I would go out and I would train. And what I ended up doing is I would plan on the map. And I just completely said, you know what? I'm not going to even think about worrying about magnetic heading, what the variation is, what the deviation is. I'm just going to fly ground. I'm going to make a track line on the map, and I'm going to fly the track on the Doppler, and I'm going to fly speed. So in other words, the exact, have the pilot fly the exact speed. And so you'd fly a time, distance, and heading route, but you'd fly it on ground speed and track. And so in theory, if you started out at the right place and you flew that accurately on ground speed and track and then made your turn on time, you should be pretty on par. Then hit a release point and then calculate a timing point for deceleration and land. And so we started doing that. And then the guys were using that original plugger GPS, which is just, which was junk. But it would come up, it would get satellites, and they would give you a GPS position. And so we would compare where we were supposed to put them and where I dropped them off to where the GPS said that they were at. And I was getting them within 100 meters of where they wanted to be. And we consider that like victory. Now it would be like, 100 feet would be bad.
Yeah.
So, this is after going, say 120 miles across the desert. The moral of that story is you were asking me about some of these things that prepared me for selection to the 160th specifically. This is exactly the type of stuff that they do. You have to be able to navigate time, distance, and heading with a map accurately on target plus or minus 30 seconds. That's part of the assessment. So this was almost like pre-training for me. And then when I, prior to going to selection, I obviously went out and trained and practiced that because I knew that was a big part of what I needed to have. And I am not a natural good navigator with a map. I mean, I think I was better than average, but there's some guys that are just damn mystical with how good they are on it. It's just amazing. And so that was, some of those things I think that allowed me as a younger aviator, even though my age was a little older, my maturity as an aviator, I think was at the level or very close to the level that they were looking for when I went through the assessment. And I felt like I had a very good assessment. I was successful with my navigation. I was successful with the contingencies that they threw at me. I did well in the academics. I did well in the PT test and the swim test. That was tough. And I'm a water boy. I was a big surfer my whole life. So I was very comfortable in the water, but I basically drowned for 15 minutes.
What did they have you do, Mike? Like you said, you're a swimmer and you're talking like this is terrible. What was it?
Thank you to our sponsor, Collins Aerospace Goodrich. Whether your mission is saving lives or servicing high-value assets, Collins Aerospace's Goodrich hoists stay ready to assist. Features such as single-point payout reduce the potential for hoist-induced load swings, enhancing overall safety.
Well, it was just physically demanding, and you have to be very, very comfortable in the water. And so what I remember, and this, you got to remember, this is 1980, 89, I guess it was late January of 89, I think. And so you did it in a flight suit and boots.
Yeah.
So, when you have boots on your feet, you don't even feel like you're moving any water, whatsoever. So from what I recall, and I'm sure it's probably different, I don't know what the assessment is like today, but you had to tread water with your hands, your fingertips out of the water, so just with your feet, keep your head up, or even if you held your breath and, laid your face in the water, which you could do, you had to keep your hands out of the water, right? Then you had to, I was just thinking about this the other day, and I do remember that particular part. I remember basically floating, bobbing, basically.
Yeah.
And then hands only, essentially. Couldn't touch the side. You couldn't quit, so on and so forth. So basically, it was a whole lot of treading water and floating and bobbing. And
right.
I'm very lean, so I just sink like a rock unless I have my lungs full, which is what I tried to do. Yeah. So I just basically tried to keep air in my lungs so I could keep my hands up out of the water and just sort of relax and swirl kick, like, how you turn a surfboard around, you're catching a wave, right? Just kind of that motion. And, physically it's demanding. It starts, your heart rate starts elevating and you're sort of holding your breath. You want to take a deep breath, so on and so forth. But yeah, I wish I could remember exactly. I think they called it like a Navy Class 1 at the time or something. Wow. Honestly, I just remember it being, and I was like so glad when I got through that and I passed it. I'm like, okay, that's because a lot of people failed it. Actually.
Oh, that's challenging without boots on.
Oh yeah,
without a flight suit on. That sounds challenging to me.
I mean, how many times have all of us been through the dunker training, and they sent us 1 year to Miramar, and it's when the Navy still had it,
right?
And we're a bunch of law enforcement aviators. We thought we were just going to the dunker. Well, we were foolish. We had to pass their swim test first.
Yes.
And when it got to the treading water, we all looked out of the pool like, you want us to what? And they tortured us. And most of us barely made it to the dunker. So right. I feel your pain. It was a horrible experience.
Yeah. Yeah. But a necessary one.
Yeah.
We spent a lot of time over water and chasing ships and, offshore stuff. And it's a statistical fact that if you've been through dunker and been successful at dunker, your chances of surviving going in the drink is significantly better.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed.
We go to dunker, actually. Well, that's a little bit of a misstatement. We do send people to the East Coast because that's the only one I think that's available now that we can get our hands on. But we do like a refresher training. We have our own seat. We have the seat belts. We put the helmet on, we cable up. We use the heats. We flip people into the water each year, because we go out to Catalina. So that's getting harder.
Yeah. And
I'll admit, I don't particularly care for it anymore.
I don't either. And it's uncomfortable. As many times as I've been through it, I do not like going. And it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I hated it.
Yeah.
I only had to do it a few times in-house and I hated it. There's photos of me with terror in my eyes with a bunch of SWAT guys and pilots around me laughing their asses off because I did not like it. They knew it and they made sure to get as many photos as possible of the terror of Jack,
Real treat when you get kicked in the face too, following somebody out a window.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, like you said with those, it's statistically it's going to happen, right? And so being prepared for that anomaly, you can only do that through that type of training. There's no other way to prepare yourself. RJ Garwood talked about that at length when we had him on the podcast, and he brought up some really interesting points, and how you train is how you fight.
Yeah.
And if you're not training like you're going to fight, then you're doing yourself a disservice.
Yeah.
You know, and so I think it's great you guys are doing that, especially given that you're flying over the ocean to Catalina quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yep.
So for the folks that aren't familiar with LA County, can you talk about the distance basically from the shoreline to Catalina and how much time you spend over the water as a result of that?
It's 23 miles. Yeah, it's 23 miles one way, open channel. And there's a lot of boats, so fortunately, I always said if I'm in the water more than about 15 minutes, I'm going to be pissed.
Yeah.
I don't want to, and I don't, this is not anything against the Coast Guard brethren, but the way they've restructured, and then they've got their I guess forward unit at Point Magoo now. They were at LA, but their response times and their ability to, they have such a, I think, unrealistic demand of what they're supposed to cover in terms of geographical space that it's difficult for them to be, very quick in their response.
Wow. When did they move to Magoo, Mike? Is that recent?
No, it's been quite a while actually. Yeah. So they left LA, they went up to the Bay Area, I believe, but they forward deployed a small detachment to Magoo to still kind of cover the space between San Diego and Santa Barbara, well, even north of Santa Barbara for that matter. And right now I think they're in the process of realizing that they need to do some things a bit differently.
Interesting.
From what I understand.
Mike, you brought something up that I want to touch on here for a second. You talked about before you became a instructor pilot, you felt like you weren't prepared, or you were terrified of the idea of being an instructor pilot because you're required now to be the master and to know all of that. And I think when you think about training, I don't think most people feel like they are prepared to instruct, because there's so many, doesn't matter what the topic is, there's so many things you're required to know and you're looked to as being the expert. So for Tony and Jack, can you talk about your experiences as, I know you both of you are flight instructors. And so when you became a CFI, can you talk to that thought process and how that actually helped you master your craft?
Yeah. I mean, I think Jack, and I won't speak for Jack, but I'm going to guess that what Jack did as a flight instructor and what I'm doing and has always done as a flight instructor are two different things. I consider myself lucky that, and I think Jack went down this road and he can confirm this, I don't get a guy handed to me that is 0-time pilot and I got to take him through all the book work and all the FARs and all that stuff. I consider myself lucky. I get a guy within our unit that has a minimum of 2,000 hours, and he gets over to the fire rescue side with me as an instructor. And it's my job to take him from a law enforcement pilot and make him into a firefighting pilot and a hoist rescue pilot. And I will say it's a huge eye opener for the guy that's coming from the law enforcement side, flying a Bell 407, and now he's going into a medium. And let's just take the firefighting side. His whole world is going to be, 50 feet, 50 knots in the wire environment, in the smoke. And is it a huge eye opener for that guy coming over from the law enforcement side? Yeah, it is. Yeah. Doing out of ground effect hovers with somebody, another life coming up on the hoist cable. It's a huge transition for somebody like that. But I think Jack will chime in here. I think you were taking people that were just learning as a pilot, correct?
Correct.
Something completely different than I was.
Yeah, correct. I took people from not zero, supervisors said zero, not even any fixed wing. And then our line pilots, they came in with at least a fixed wing and 100 hours PIC time.
Okay.
So at least they knew something. They knew how to change a radio frequency and
Sure.
they knew how to talk on the radio. They knew, they didn't know anything about the controls and the helicopter, but at least they knew some stuff. And I remember being terrified, that I really wanted to do it. I was looking forward to it, but at the same time, I was terrified.
There was a lot of responsibility. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's huge responsibility.
Yeah.
And, so many things can go wrong, and they do. And I saw that around me with very people that were much more experienced than me having incidents with students. And I'm going, wow, what am I getting into? But the one that really affected me going back to what John's looking for here is when the chief pilot came to me and said, "Hey, we want you to be one of our check airmen too." I went, "Oh, Donnie, no way. Are you kidding? Do check rides? I'm terrified of check rides, you know?"
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he goes, No, you can do it. We'll get you ready. That was hard because now you're out there, with line pilots, people that have much more experience than me in some cases, and you're rolling it off and you're doing all the emergency procedures and all the auto rotations and all that stuff. But I will say this, as hard as that was in the beginning and how difficult it was and how scary it was, it soon became wonderful. And I loved doing that.
I agreed. Doing the fire rescue stuff, and it prepared me, and it goes down the same road as what Mike told us. Is now one of my side jobs, I'm teaching pilots from other agencies to do the same thing for a side rescue company. And I would never have been able to do that if I didn't do the CFI portion and taking brand new fire rescue people and, getting them ready for their carting through CAL FIRE or forestry, getting them their 100 hours in type. And you are basically putting your stamp on them that after their carting flight, they're now going to take on, a 7-man helitac crew that they're responsible for, but it's still your name on him because you trained him. There's a huge responsibility there.
It all goes back to what you said, Mike, with being okay with putting yourself in a position you're uncomfortable with, and all three of you did that, and you all benefited from that decision to be uncomfortable. You all went to places that you didn't expect.
Yeah.
So
That's
Mike,
for
going
sure.
back to you with that, how did that lean into your decision and your selection to get into the 160th and what that selection process looked like? We've talked about a little bit already, but maybe you can go into a little more detail there.
Yeah. I wanted more, I had these great young guys around me, but I wanted more intensity. I wanted to be around more very similar, like-minded, aggressive people that wanted to be a soldier as well as a pilot and work with, the best soldiers that the military has to offer. So when the opportunity came to assess, I'm like, well, I'm going to do it, no matter what. And if they don't think that I'm capable or worthy or I can't pass the assessment or whatever, I didn't really care. I just was going to do it. And so fortunately I was ready, and I did pass and I was selected, and it was again a perfect opportunity. I mean, I'm a tadpole in the scheme of things. And even if you come into the 160th as a senior aviator, you're still going to be a junior aviator as far as they're concerned.
Yeah.
And so it was easy for me to take that role. I mean, I'm like, okay, I'll be I'll do whatever the hell you tell me to do. And again, they had a lot of very experienced guys. They had just come back from Desert Storm, and I had as well. And so, you do your thing where they size you up and see what you're all about. And again, great mentoring, took me under their wing, and we just started training like crazy. But that time frame, shortly thereafter is the Clinton era. And again, a lot of drawdown, a lot of change in the military, the don't ask, don't tell. I mean, you name it during that time frame. But as a SOCOM unit, our ability to train and was not affected at all.
Yeah.
And so there wasn't a lot of combat opportunities to speak of, but I could fly literally as much as I wanted. And then we ended up, the long and the short of that was I got progressed quite quickly, at least to FMQ, because a lot of the senior guys were leaving the unit at that point too. Some were retiring and, moving on. So an FMQ is a fully mission qualified pilot, basically aircraft commander. So if nothing else, I'm, chalked to a flight and I get to command my own aircraft. We ended up doing extensive deployments to Joint Task Force 6, which is a counter-narcotics operation down in El Paso. So doing a lot of desert flying down there and a lot of training and working with fifth group guys who were doing JTF-6 along the border as well. So just a lot of growth there as well. And 1st Battalion, 75th Rangers is there at Savannah. So work with the Rangers a lot and doing all special mission tasks. A lot of helo casting, a lot of fast roping, a lot of assaults, complex assaults. Worked, we went up to Bragg all the time, worked with 7th Group, went up to Virginia Beach to work with the White Soft teams at that time. So a lot of training, a lot of deployment training, cross-country training, long-range navigation training, a lot of goggle training in a beautiful airplane. And that allowed me to mature and progress quite a bit, as an aviator. And then, 3rd year or something, I became a flight lead. But at the same time, I got married and I had started having kids and ended up with 2 kids. And man, it was a stressful time because we didn't really do a lot of training at home. So even though it wasn't combat deployments, it was just, CONUS deployments a week at a time, 10 days, maybe a month, so on and so forth. Very demanding, especially as a flight lead. You're doing all the planning and all the execution of it.
And it wasn't just out of town training. Sometimes it was out of country training,
yes.
Right, Mike?
Oh yeah. Absolutely. The one good thing about the regiment is they do environmental training. Yeah. So you're going to go. A lot of South America is wide open for jungle training, but you've got overwater training. We go down to the Gulf Coast and use the oil rigs as targets, for overwater training, and up into Montana and Wyoming and Colorado for mountain training and working in the snow environment and desert. And so it's all environmental as well as task-oriented training. So it's, really wide variety of training to include cross-country flying in and out of large airports. And you're going IFR sometimes as well. And that is not typical for Army aviators. So fly an IFR, fly a normal IFR. Sometimes I'd fly in one night from Savannah to El Paso.
Wow.
So
geez.
It was great for a young pilot that wants to fly a lot. It was fantastic. And it was very versatile flying. And that isn't even close to as versatile a flying as I did in the latter part of my career, but it really set me up well for it. I thought I was a very competent instrument pilot. I thought I was a very competent goggle pilot and tactical pilot. But it came to a point where I was getting a little bit frustrated and I wanted something more. I wasn't really quite sure what that was. I think the kicker was Haiti was getting ready to go off, and we were doing all the rehearsals for the operation. And I came into work one morning and a lot of stuff going on at the hangar. And I went out in the hangar and 1st Battalion guys were in our hangar taking a lot of our equipment off of our aircraft. So I'm like, what the frick? So I turn around, I beeline into my platoon leader's office and I said, what the hell is going on? And they said, hey, we're off the comp plan. 1st Battalion's taking our FLIRs and other, stuff for his backup, so on and so forth. And I said, that's it. I'm done.
I'm out of here.
Yeah. I thought I was at that time. My plan at that point was, I was going to go to 1st Battalion to the DAP platoon and fly Blackhawk gunships, which I was all lined up to do, by the way. It was all set. I was going to swap with a very well-known aviator named Dan Gelada's phenomenal human being. He was a instructor pilot in platoon, and we were going to do a swap. I was going to fill his spot. But my wife was not too happy about going to Fort Campbell. And then that's when another opportunity, came up. But I also elected to go to degree completion during that time. Gave me a chance to stay home with the kids. I had 2 very young kids, a wife that was, playing mom and was definitely struggling with that and me being away a lot because her family is from California as well. And that started a long, rough road for her. That was the first 6 years or so of our marriage was when I was in the 160th. So she got both barrels right away. Yeah, it was a tough time. A tough time for her.
We've heard that before, Mike, from our previous 160 guests. It is a very demanding life, and the spouses of all of you are amazing humans. They tolerate a lot. They have to put up with a lot of short notice stuff. I don't know how they do it, but they're heroes.
Thanks to our sponsor, Anodyne Electronics Manufacturing, a leading manufacturer of trusted special mission avionics for law enforcement, aerial firefighting, and utility operators. Visit www.aem-corp.com and learn how AEM's digital communication and loudspeaker systems, avionics consoles, radios, and specialty audio products can support your most demanding missions.
It's interesting. A lot of times you see one of two things. There's always something in between, but you either see complete implosion and divorce. I'm going to be the single guy, just go hog wild and, be Mr. Pilot and all that other good stuff. Or you see a pretty solid family unit with a woman that is just as committed, just as focused, just as patriotic, willing to ride that train just as hard to support you so you can go do what you need to do and keep that family together. I know she wanted to walk God knows how many times.
Yeah.
But she stuck it out because she's that tenacious of a person, and she believed in what I was doing, and she believed in me and felt like it was important. She reveled, I think, in being a patriotic American as well, and that's a big,
outstanding,
a big part. And a lot of guys that I know, especially guys that I was with in Virginia that survived, their marriages survived. It's the theme is there. It generally falls on the woman and the strength of the woman and her willingness to commit and ride out those rough times.
It's interesting to me when you look at the law enforcement community, and I guess the public safety community as compared to the military community. We have so many similarities.
Yes.
That similarity between the stress and the family, it's very similar.
Yeah.
A lot of families struggle because, mom or dad, they're working all kinds of weird hours. They're never home. The spouse feels like they're at home raising the family by themselves and doing all the jobs solo. So like you said, a lot of credit has to be given to the spouses of the folks that are in these communities.
I couldn't even hardly last today by myself with these two damn dogs. I'm ready to kill them.
I know what you're going through now.
He's got it every day. But no, and she was instrumental, and she didn't force me to make the decision that I did, to assess and go a different direction. But she was confident that I could do it. I wasn't as confident, and if it wasn't for her support, I would make an honest assessment and say, had I gone up to Campbell and to 1st Battalion and followed that path, I'd be divorced. Yeah. Almost certainly.
Yeah. It's a tough road. It's a tough road. It takes strong people, it just takes strong people. Even the kids, they have to be strong. It's amazing.
Yeah.
People don't the average American, I don't think, appreciates that aspect at all. And I know for me, the more I got to know people in the special operations realm, both pilots and operators, whatever their job was, it was such an unpredictable life. And I just watched. I mean, I know you won't mind me saying it. I was staying at a house with a pilot from SOAR, and I visited them at Fort Lewis for the day, and I was at the house, and I got to watch him come in the house and say, hey, Colette, I won't be here for Thanksgiving. I'm leaving.
Yeah.
And I remember watching her go, okay, Bob.
Yeah.
And I stood there dumbfounded. I must have looked like an idiot because I thought, Oh my God, that would have been a big discussion at my house. Oh my gosh. And she didn't blink. And I remember talking to them both about it later, and they said, that was our life. That was our life. We chose it. We knew it. We did it. And we hung together and we supported each other. And it was the right thing to do. But I just admired it. And it was things like that the average person never has to do.
Yeah.
Even, cops a little bit, but to say, hey, honey, I'm leaving for 6 months, or I'm leaving and I don't know how long.
Right.
And I won't be here for Thanksgiving. And it's, the second week of November, and you just go, wow, commitment, dedication, America. God bless America.
I can only think of one time. And when you can't really have any contact with your, that's an added measure. That's just,
I don't know how you do it.
I think only one time out of 17 years on the soft side where she called work and said, I need him to come home, or when is he coming home? And it just so happened that I was coming home in a few days anyways. She didn't know that.
Yeah.
She's broke.
Yeah.
Broken. And, but the rest of the time, numerous, the phone rang at 2:00 in the morning. She knew that it was like, okay, I'm leaving. And, she was very similar to that. She's like, well, be careful, I'll see you whenever you get back, if when you're coming back. And I think it just became a mindset, to figure out how to cope with it. She's not a drama person really anyways. But she said something to me one time. I had asked her if she ever really, worried about me. And she goes, no, I don't worry about you. Nothing bad ever happens to me. It's like, oh, well, okay. Nothing bad happens to you, but so.
Yes. Being on this side of your career, if you were to look back and give a young, aspiring 160th pilot some advice on how to navigate some of these family challenges and walk out the other side of your career with an intact marriage and all the things that go with that, what advice would you hand down to that young aviator?
Yeah, boy, that's a tough one, especially today with the way it seems like the generation of women and how they sort of think about their life and their career and all. But I think you're going to have a really strong, independent, super loyal, committed person to start with. And then secondly, you got to hand over everything else to them in life, whatever it is. You like this house? Can we afford it? Yep, it's yours. You want this particular car, and she's not a big money spender, want this, that, or, the nails or the hair or the 40 different outfits and all this other stuff. But I pretty much let her run the show and try and support it, in the best way that I can, which is essentially to provide her a nice home and a good, a safe home and take care of the kids, just financially, just all the things that a woman who is interested in marriage and family, I think, would typically want, and do whatever it takes to sort of provide that.
Yeah.
And then make them, try and at least allow them to understand that they're doing they're doing something very similar to what you are, in a sense that, you're serving America, and that's going to mean something to them. Yeah. If it doesn't mean anything to them, then it's, you're kind of sunk at that point anyways.
Absolutely true.
They have to feel that in the same way they would for a fireman or for a law enforcement. The police are supporting the community. They're supporting America in that regard, really. They're the front line of civil society, and if the woman does not embrace that and understand how important that is, I think you're kind of doomed, to begin with. I see a lot of, my daughter is marrying a guy who's in the Guard. I see a lot of daughters of military marrying military men. I think there's something to be said for that, and the type of personality that they have had sort of pushed into them by their parents, meaning my children, and then looking for those similar traits in their mate, the man. But I don't know, I'm a lousy husband. So I don't know. I don't know how I did it.
Maybe recognizing that's the first step.
Yeah. I'm doing a lot of stuff, but that's not one of them. I can tell you that.
Well, Tony and Jack, you've had long, successful careers in public safety and both long, successful marriages. Can you guys speak to that and what's been helpful for you guys, and maybe some advice you'd have for young first responders that are kind of just starting or maybe midway through their career?
Yeah, I'm coming up on, 42 years. I'm about the same age as Mike. Have there been some peaks and valleys along the way and some speed bumps? Absolutely. Would I say we had the perfect marriage? No, we had some rough times. The midnight shifts and, coming home from trying out for the SWAT Academy, and she's, shaking the CS gas out of my fatigues and washing them and having her face blow up and going to have those ready for me the next morning when I go back. She has been a complete warrior. I mean, all in all the time, backed everything I did all the time. I can't say anything bad about her. She was a rock star the whole way and supported everything I did. And to go down along the lines of what Mike said, I always tried to, provide a good home and an atmosphere to raise our kids. And all of that goes a long way. But I do, before I hand it off to Jack, I do see relationships a lot different now with the different, I'll say in law enforcement, the generation has changed, and the outlook on, I think marriage has changed a lot also. So I do think it's a little different now, and I don't know if Jack will agree with me, but
no, I agree completely. The first thing that comes to mind.
I came up in an old school environment from, the way I was brought up, and it worked out for me, but I think things are different now.
Well, I think one of the things that's different now is how another generation looks at the job. Yeah, I think I can speak for everybody here that we lived for the job. I mean, it was like the job was first. It really was. You really wanted to go to work, and you wanted to go out and work hard and do all this exciting stuff. And, you didn't want to be on the day watch. You want to be on the night watch because that's when the action is.
Yeah, exactly.
And now it's just like, it's not the same. So I think it's different for relationships, but I can say that a lot of it's the same as what Mike and Tony have said, is that, Tracy's been a gem. I won the lottery there. And this is my second marriage. First one, not so much. And I could see why in hindsight. I look at it and go, well, I was all about the job. 100%. I was a young street cop working South Central with my hair on fire, working graveyard shift almost the entire time that we were married. And no wonder it didn't work,
Yeah.
But Tracy's been a gem because she knew what she was getting into. I made sure she knew what she was getting into. We had long talks about hours and days off and holidays and all that stuff. She knew all that, and she worked retail, so her hours were screwed up too, but we made it work, and it wasn't perfect, but we made it work, and we're happier than ever. I think. We are. It's been great. We raised 2 great kids. We have 5 great grandkids. We're very happy, and I don't know that I could give perfect advice at all, but I will say this: your spouse better know what they're getting into.
Yeah,
absolutely.
They have to know that, the good, the bad, and the ugly. You can't just say, "Oh, this is a great life. Look at what I make this amount of money, and we can have a nice house and a car and all that." Yeah, but that's mildly interesting at 3 a.m. when you're not there.
Yeah.
So that's probably the best thing, is make sure that they have a reality check about what this job entails, whether it's fire, military, law enforcement, for any kind of first responder job. It's different. It's unique. There are many negatives.
Think back, all four of us sitting here looking at each other on the screen. Think back to when you started your career with your friends and how many of them did not make it marriage-wise. And I could, there's a lot.
Majority.
Yeah. It's just a rough job. Military, law enforcement, it doesn't matter. The divorce rate is high because things happen. I mean, and a lot of it is being gone, shift work. For Mike, it's being gone a long time. For months at a time. And, the sad thing is not everybody survives that.
No, I think though, the other part, I think she's part of it. Just sometimes she's okay with me. I think she likes when I'm gone. Especially now on the fire side, because it's only 24 hours at a time. And then I come home, or maybe I might do 48 or something like that. But for the most part, just in the last 11 years of my career, I did 9 deployments to Bosnia, 9 to Iraq, and 3 to Afghanistan, and 1 to another place undisclosed. But that didn't include training, CONUS trips, everything in between. That's a lot. I mean, that's almost unreasonable. In the request, and the kids, and it's the kids. We haven't even talked about the kids, but I chose to do it. She knew that I wanted to go where I eventually ended up, and it was where I needed to be. In all honesty, really, I think I'd finally hit sort of the pay dirt, if you will, and finding the Shangri-La of the people and the focus, the mission, everything about it. So. I don't have any regrets. I hope she doesn't. She probably does. But.
John, you have some experience in this. You won the lottery too. Yeah, talk about your angle in this, John.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Hangar Z podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more stories that promote the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Lastly, stand by for a message after a word from our sponsors. Cheers.
Thanks to our sponsor, Anodyne Electronics Manufacturing, a leading manufacturer of trusted special mission avionics for law enforcement, aerial firefighting, and utility operators. Visit www.aem-corp.com and learn how AEM's digital communication and loudspeaker systems, avionics consoles, radios, and specialty audio products can support your most demanding missions. Thank you to our sponsor, Wysong Enterprises. Wysong Enterprises offers specialty rotorcraft completion facility, focusing on solutions and installs for customers in various industries, including EMS, law enforcement, energy utility, forestry, tourism, security, and corporate applications across major OEM platforms. Visit us at wysongusa.com. Thank you to our sponsor, Collins Aerospace Goodrich. Whether your mission is saving lives or servicing high-value assets, Collins Aerospace's Goodrich hoists stay ready to assist. Features such as single-point payout reduce the potential for hoist-induced load swings, enhancing overall safety.
As we wrap up this episode, it's clear that the journey of a pilot, aircrew member, maintainer, or public safety professional is marked by unique challenges that extend beyond the cockpit. Mike Sagely's insights remind us of the critical importance of a balanced family life and mental health as we navigate demanding careers in aviation. The pressures of those professions can take a toll, but with strong communication, understanding, and support from loved ones, it's possible to foster healthy relationships and maintain mental well-being. Prioritizing family dynamics and mental health is vital not just for personal fulfillment, but also for ensuring that we can perform at our best in our professional roles. By focusing on these aspects, we not only enrich our own lives, but also enhance our capacity to serve our communities effectively. Let us all strive to create that balance, recognizing that our greatest strength comes from the support of our families and the mental resilience we built along the way. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Hangar Z podcast. Cheers.
Time to close up the hangar. Thanks for joining us on the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts.